KILMAINHAM Jail in Dublin, Ireland. A historic institution. KILMAINHAM is oftentimes referred to as the Bastille of Ireland. Let's pick up with 1916, the Rising, Easter Rising. Let's do that again. Okay. Let's magnify, get some text, and here we are. 1916. It's a six-day event rooted in the perception of Irish history as an 800-year struggle to escape the bonds of British rule. 800 years. As with the previous rebellions, its real significance lay not in its military achievement, but in its symbolic power. The semiotic value of these events, how they are remembered, how they are commemorated, how they serve as inspiration for other struggles. Following a week of confusion culminating in the Chief of Staff of the Irish Volunteers, McNeill, Counter-Commanding Patrick Pearse orders for full mobilization. The Military Council of the IRB nevertheless decided to proceed with the rebellion in the face of overwhelming military odds. Rising began on Easter Monday, 24th of April. The taking of the General Post Office and other strategic buildings around Dublin. The total number involved was small, about 1,500 under Pearse, and the Irish Citizens Army of 220 under James Connolly. These were eventually confronted by an overwhelming force of 20,000 British soldiers under the command of Brigadier General Lowe. About 450 were killed in the Rising and 2,600 were wounded. Place this in context. The British had 20,000 British soldiers in 1916, in the midst of the First World War, which is a major indication of how serious Britain took the struggle in Ireland. 20,000 British soldiers. And the struggle, Easter Rising, was very much an exercise in guerrilla warfare. Since these Irish volunteers were not necessarily walking around with identifiable uniforms and so on and so forth, guerrilla warfare. And in this part of the exhibit, we see these dots that can be illuminated, activated by the tourists. And these are the locations, the key sites, explosions, attacks, shootings, so on and so forth. And this is the aerial view of the post office that was damaged. Irish Republican. The newspaper covering this major event. Sinn Féin, rebellion in Ireland, making international news. This is just not an Irish event, this is an international story. So, we've spent considerable quality time in the exhibition space. We've just been notified that the 215 tour is forming a queue. We find our tickets. We anticipate visiting the institution. They fling open the doors and we enter the compound, gazing up at the bricks and mortar. Authenticity is what we want. We want to be convinced that what we are witnessing is grounded in truth. As you can see, the British put a lot of time and effort in the planning and construction of Kilmainham. Much like other prisons we visited in this series, like Eastern State in Philadelphia, we have this similar design of the interior, these vaulted ceilings. But first, we are going to be further informed by an audiovisual presentation. Once again, language primacy, Irish first, English second. That's the way it is, folks. So, we stroll the length of the corridor, absorbing the interior, the immediate environment, appreciating its authenticity, and we enter what appears to be both an auditorium as well as a chapel, a Catholic chapel. And it is here that we are instructed as a group to take a seat on these benches, and the tour guide then activates a video and participates in an Irish tradition of storytelling. The sign of a clever Irishman or Irishwoman is the capacity to tell a story. And this is the story of 1916 about Joe Plunkett and his beautiful fiancée, Grace Gifford. Joe Plunkett is among those who is arrested by the British forces in the Easter Rising of 1916. And like the others, he is sentenced to death by way of firing squad. He makes one modest request. Would he be allowed to marry Grace Gifford? And in a sign of compassion, he is granted his wish, and they are married. Hours later, Joe Plunkett is executed by firing squad. That story is then punctuated by the realization that we are sitting in the chapel where this couple exchanged vows. Holy matrimony. This was their wedding in this very space. Authenticity also permeates space. This is where it happened. That is authenticity. That makes the tour even more worthwhile. We can even peer into the holding cells where the rebels were held prior to their execution by the British military. And it is here that we see the cell of Grace Gifford with her married name, Mrs. Joseph Plunkett. She was also arrested and placed in Kilmainham jail, like many other women. However, the British courts were sparing the women of execution, which of course, for these brave Irish women who wanted that badge of honor of being executed alongside other Irish volunteers, the chivalry, the insult against these Irish volunteer women. We take a peek inside and we see a religious emblem inside the cell of Gracie Gifford, Mrs. Joseph Plunkett. The door is locked. We cannot enter. In museum studies, we oftentimes refer to this as creating a source of tension between what we want to see and enter, which is the interior of the cell, is being obstructed by a locked door. It has an emotive result in frustrating the tourist, which was part of the performance. Part of the performance as a storytelling institution. Other cells are open to the public. So we stand inside and gaze out. Let us pause at this moment because we are going to, in the next episode, witness, absorb the grand atrium of the East Wing. And we're going to see Victorian architecture in prime form.